hour ahead of us live to take your calls. You have questions about the Bible, the Christian faith, difference of opinion with the host, you want a balanced comment, that's what we're here for. Feel free to give me a call. The number is 844-484-5737. Most of our lines are full, but we have 2 open lines now. So the next 2 people who call will get in right away. I mean, they'll be online to get in before we're done. They'll be waiting. But the number is 844-484-5737. All right, we're going to talk next to Colin from Morgan Hill, California. Hi, Colin, welcome.
Hi, Steve. I'm listening to your astrology teaching on the Neural Path website, and I was just wondering how have your views about what you taught back then changed over time, if they changed at all?
Well, okay, just so people know what we're talking about, I don't believe in astrology, but there is a line of thinking which many evangelical teachers have written books about that suggests that the signs of the zodiac, while they do not function the way that astrology suggests, they do have a purpose, and that God has put them in the sky for signs. Now, a sign doesn't govern your life; it just conveys information. It says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, that God put the stars and the sun and the moon for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So, the suggestion is that God is communicating something, as you do with the sign. The sign has information on it. And so, whereas satanic or occultic astrology views the houses of the zodiac as almost like having divine powers, and they dictate the fate of those who are born in certain relations to them, that's idolatry. That's superstition. But that's simply the way the devil has perverted something that really exists, that God did make. And what he made was constellations, which have been fairly recognized by most cultures around the world, that some people think these constellations represent elements of the gospel. And, that Virgo represents the Virgin that Jesus was born from. And that, Sagittarius or whatever, a centaur or whatever, it's part man, part beast. It kind of pictures how Jesus is part divine and part animal, and part human. And that some people think the twins, Gemini, represent the 2 natures of Christ. Now it's not possible to prove that this is so. And even the people who've written extensive books on the subject, there's some pretty thick books written by Christians on this, they go into great detail. They don't claim that they can prove it, but they do put out what they consider to be a plausible case that these signs that God has put in the heavens, and which are recognized by people of virtually all societies throughout history, that they are communicating something. Of what in the world would they be communicating? Well, the suggestion is they're communicating the gospel in some way. Now, it does say in in Psalm 19, the opening verse, says, "The heavens declare the glory of God." The firmament, meaning the sky, shows forth his handiwork. It says, "Night unto night they utter speech, day unto day they reveal knowledge." It says there is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Now, it says that the stars in the heavens are declaring the glory of God, and their voice and the knowledge that they convey are really heard by everybody. That is, it's like a universal message in the sky. Now, because it has been corrupted by occultic adoption of their own way of looking at these signs, I think that the devil may have obscured the message, and there's not many modern people, maybe none, that we know of, who can really decipher them in quite the right way. And so this is very theoretical. Some think that in earlier times, these signs were easily understood by the philosophers and the astronomers and the people just who looked up and studied these things, and that the message was the message of Christ. It's interesting that when God told Abram to go out and look into the sky and number the stars, God said, "So shall your seed be Now, of course, generally speaking, we understand him to be saying, as numerous as the stars, your seed shall be like that. But some think that there's a sort of another kind of shade of meaning, that your seed, the Messiah, will be like that which is portrayed in these signs. And Paul actually quotes in Romans 15, I think. It's chapter 10, Romans 10. He quotes from Psalm 19. And he says, he's talking about the people who are unbelievers. He says, well, haven't they heard? He says, lo, they have heard. And then he quotes from Psalm 19, their voice went out to all the earth. There's no language or tongue that their voice is not heard. In other words, he basically quotes the psalmist, who's saying that the heavens are declaring the glory of God. And Paul's saying, well, have the heathen heard about Christ? Have the heathen heard about God? He says, they have. And he quotes the psalm that says. And I would say now, having gotten older and more cautious, I'd say, it could be, it's plausible, but I would not be able to be dogmatic on the subject at this point. That's how I would have changed.
I assume that would be your answer. It sounded like it was an older lecture, but thank you so much.
All right. God bless you. You going to see me in Morgan Hill tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Great. I look forward to it. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Let's talk to Dave in Louisville, Ohio. Hi, Dave. Welcome.
Yeah. Can you hear me there?
Sure.
Okay. So I've not done this for like 30 years, but somehow got a hold of your book, the 4 different views of Revelation, a number of years back, and so when I found you on YouTube and started listening to your stuff, I was really, really fascinated. I recommended your book to other guys. I grew up Amish Mennonite, and so we had about half of my teachers in Bible school were premillennial and half were amillennial. So I'm really was fascinated by your material there. But I have about 6 or 7 questions, which I know you can't answer all, but I'm curious what you think of Gene Edwards and the house church movement.
Well, I read some of Gene Edwards' stuff back in the 70s. His book, The Tale of Three Kings, was pretty popular in the circles I was in, and of course he was pioneering in a house church kind of movement, which I think he started in the Santa Barbara area in California. Then he moved, I believe, to Jacksonville, Florida, and I don't imagine he's alive today. I haven't kept track. He'd be very.
I was at his burial 2 years ago in Texas.
Okay, so I hadn't heard he had died, but it doesn't surprise me. He's a lot older than me. I don't want to speak evil of the dead because he had a lot of good to say. I just know that some people who had been part of this community in Jacksonville, I talked to later, and apparently they felt it was kind of had sort of a controlling, kind of a cult-like thing about it. I can't say that from my own experience, but I will say when I read his book, The Tale of Three Kings, there was a certain tone to it that I thought, I don't know, it kind of almost like, how, I'm not going to say he's a cult leader because I can't say that, but how in cults, they kind of, the leaders get the impression that they're the ones who are really enlightened, and virtually everyone else in the church is messed up. And that's how cults get their following. They say, why go to any other church where they're so in the dark, whereas I've got the light here? He didn't say it like that, and I don't want to slander him, but I kind of got that kind of vibe. I kind of got that kind of vibe reading. And then later on, when I met people who had been in his church, that's kind of what they said too. So I'm not going to. I've never met the man. So, I don't like to criticize people that I'm not expert about. I will say that what he wrote in the books I've seen was not heretical,
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the house church movement kind of trace their history to, being with him there.
Yeah. Well, I went to a bunch of his seminars, meetings, talked to him, and he was a very strong, opinionated person, and one of those situations where, like Paul and Peter, sometimes I had a tough time getting along with Paul and Silas and everything. I started sort of what I thought. But I've appreciated a lot of his books. And, so, hey, another question, and you can tell me when you're getting done. Love your enemies. What's your thoughts on Christians going to war, killing other people, Christians or non-Christians, in war?
Growing up, I never met a Mennonite, but reading the Sermon on the Mount in my early years, I became quite Anabaptistic in my understanding of violence. Just the Sermon on the Mount kind of made me a pacifist. And I actually wrote a manuscript against Christians fighting in war and things like that back when I was in my early 20s.
What's the name of this?
It's not published.
I've never read that.
It's not published. It was just a manuscript. I didn't get it published. But
is it available, like even in a rough form?
I don't think so. I mean, there may be a folder somewhere in my files of it. It was before we had computers, so it isn't digitally preserved or anything like that. It's on type paper with a typewriter. But no, I don't. I certainly couldn't easily lay my hand on it right now. But I made a good case for pacifism. But I have to say that as I, studied the Sermon on the Mount, studied other parts of the Bible too, including the Apostles' writings and so forth, and synthesized it, I came to believe that Jesus' teaching about turning the other cheek and such, and loving your enemy, was primarily in the context of your neighbor who doesn't like you. A man who wants to insult you by slapping you across the face, just absorb it and be gracious about it and turn the other cheek. Humbly, don't let your pride diplomacy get you into a conflict. And I'm not saying that Jesus wouldn't say that we should love our political enemies. I think we should. I think we should love every human being on the planet. But to take what Jesus said on that subject, say, therefore God would never approve of any war, I think goes beyond anything Jesus actually said, or Paul, because frankly they didn't address war, because they both lived at the time of what we call the Pax Romana, where the Romans had conquered all the area around and everyone was at peace. There just wasn't any war. And so Jesus didn't have to instruct his disciples about war. He instructed them about their interpersonal relationships with people who were antagonistic toward them. But when it comes to, the example of turning the other cheek, obviously, if somebody's doing that to you, absorb it. Love your personal foe. And, don't fight back, just, love him, even though he doesn't love you. But when it comes to, a different situation where it's not just you, let's just say someone breaks into your house and wants to kill your wife and children. Well, that's not the situation Jesus is talking about. And, then it's not just a matter of loving the enemy. You got to love your wife and kids too. And the question is, am I supposed to love the bad guy more than I love the good guys? Or does God still, as he always did in the Old Testament, still stand on the side of the innocent against the unjust? I mean, God is for justice. God always, even in the Old Testament, said that people should love their enemies. In the law of Moses, in the Exodus, it says that the man who hates you, his donkey has fallen under his load, help him up. If you see the ox of your enemy wandering free, take it back to him. In Proverbs, it says, if your enemy is hungry, give him food. If he's thirsty, give him drink. In other words, the Old Testament itself said that you should be kind and loving to your enemy. But that didn't cancel out the fact that when they were invaded by people who wanted to slaughter their women and children, they took up arms to defend them. And this is something that is distasteful for me, because I don't hate anyone enough to want to kill them. But it would be a question of, if I'm in the position to save the life of some innocent people who are being attacked by somebody who, in God's sight, what they're doing is worthy of death, the Bible says, then, I don't want to be the executioner, but if it's up to me or nobody, I don't know. I think I could justify defending the innocent. I'm still a very non-violent person. And I've only been struck once by someone hostile. I literally did turn the other cheek. And I'd like to do that every time that happened. But I've never been in a situation where people who were under my care were in mortal danger from some other source, where, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I'd hopefully lay down my life for them. But if laying down my life just means that the attacker now has me out of the way and he's going to get them next, maybe it's more loving to stop him first, you know? So this is a hard call. What I would say is I do believe Christians have one obligation, and that is to love their neighbor as themselves. But when it comes to war, different Christians interpret that differently. Some Christians say, I love my enemy, so I can't go to war and fight against him. I can't kill him because I'm supposed to love him. Others say, well, I love my neighbor, and that's why I will defend him from monsters who are violently trying to, kill him. And, if you want to save somebody from a violent death when you can, how can it be said that you love them? So the question is, who am I supposed to love most? Obviously, I should love everybody, all other things being equal. But what if all things are not equal? And there's a bad guy trying to hurt innocent people, and I can love him by just keeping my hands in my pockets and letting him do what he's going to do to those people, or I can love them by stopping. And I have to say, thinking through it holistically, the whole Testament of Scripture, it seems like stopping them is the more loving thing to do. But, of course, the Bible doesn't address it because there wasn't war at the time of the New Testament, and therefore none of the people that were addressed by Jesus or the apostles were in a position to make a decision of going to war or not. So it wasn't addressed. So what we are told is to love our neighbor, and I can appreciate someone who says, I can't hurt my neighbor because I'm supposed to love him. And I can also appreciate the verse says, because I love my neighbor, I will defend my neighbor from people who are evil and nasty monsters who want to just kill them for no good reason. So I think just you need to always love your neighbor and then act as love would dictate at the time, I would say. And I'm not going to predict exactly what that would be in every situation, because there definitely are various ones. Hey, brother, I've got my lights full. I need to take some more callers before I'm done, but I appreciate you joining us.
Yes, sir. You have a good day.